When you hear the word courage, a lot of people think of like firefighter running into a burning building. Yes, that is one form of courage. We're talking about like showing up as your authentic self. That takes
Mhm.
a whole heck of a lot of courage.
Welcome to Podcast Coaching for Kingdom Entrepreneurs. I'm Kristin Chadwick, your podcast coach on this transformative podcasting journey. Our mission, empower Kingdom entrepreneurs to confidently launch and grow podcasts, fostering a journey of being seen, being heard, being known, and making a lasting kingdom impact. This is Podcast Coaching for Kingdom Entrepreneurs. Your voice matters. All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. I am Kristin Chadwick, and I have the lovely Alexis Lenihan here with me today. And she is not only going to be bringing some fire on how we can develop some really good habits as podcasters, but she's also going to bless us with just her wisdom and her knowledge as a coach. And I love bringing on coaches because I feel like with mainly our audience being coaches, we all need to be coached. And sometimes we forget that we need to be coached. And so I'm just honored that you're here and you're going to be helping us coach and walk through some of these habits today.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes. All right. So we're going to dive right in because I love what you teach people, which is high performance habits. And with that, I asked you if you could share specifically for podcasters how we can up our game and really just take it to the next level with these high performance habits. So I'm going to let you just take the ball and run like you've got a room full of podcasters that are ready to hear what you have to say.
Excellent. Fantastic. Yeah. So, you know, I'm a high performance coach. So, when I am looking at anything, whether it's, a specific career, podcasting, anything, I really, really believe with all my heart that it does start with us. So getting our own habits and mindsets in the right place for success in any area of our lives, because really like every part of our life is interconnected. So if one area is not doing great, chances are eventually you may be able to keep it together for a little while, but it's going to seep into other areas. So I want to share with your community the 5 habits of high performance. And we kind of define high performance as simply a heightened and sustained level of performance over the long term without risking things or sacrificing things like your relationships, your health, your sanity, all those really important things. So just wanted to put that out there first, because that's kind of the mindset that we're kind of going into this with. So the first habit that I want to share is the habit of clarity. And, this is so true in pretty much any area of life, specifically even just starting with ourselves. And typically we look at having a good degree of clarity or an understanding of what's important to us right now at this age and stage of our life, because it changes. What was important to me in my 20s is not as important to me now as I'm in my early 40s, right? So things
Totally.
change. So having, taking stock and looking around and saying, okay, what's really important to me now? And we look at this in kind of 4 key areas: self, social, skill, and service. And so with that self category, who am I now? What's important? Who am I and what am I bringing to the world, right? In general, into every conversation I'm having with people. When I'm by myself, the projects I choose to pursue, like how am I showing up? And what does that look like for me right now?
Okay.
The social looks like, what do I want my relationships to look and feel like? And so I like to kind of go do a tour around family, friends, maybe coworkers or team, and then kind of that those broader relationships. So specifically, what do you want those relationships to look like? Skill, do I have clarity around where I need to maybe up my game? Right.
Mhm.
So for podcasters, like, is there a specific skill you haven't quite mastered yet, or something where, maybe it's tech related, maybe it's delivery, maybe it's, storytelling, like whatever it could be. But there's a ton of skills that are required, right, within this kind of area. So is there somewhere, being really honest with ourselves, we can be doing, good, but is there an area where we really need to put a little bit more time and effort and maybe start to master some of these skills? And then the last one is service. What's the difference that I want to make in the world? So looking specifically, I mean, I feel like every podcast has, it has an audience, but has a thing that they want to accomplish. Are you really crystal clear on what that contribution is for you and your podcast? And are you achieving that? Are you kind of running in line with that? Because sometimes, there's lots of distractions, lots of things kind of pulling at our attention that we can say, oh, that looks kind of shiny or that looks kind of cool. And then we kind of start to diversify and we get away from that mission, that service that we really, the reason we started the podcast. Like, what's the message that we have that we want to share with others?
So good. Okay. So the 5 skills, clear or habits, clarity, self,
Well,
social. Oh, go ahead.
clarity is the first habit. Clarity is the first habit. So,
Oh,
but within that, yeah, within
wow.
that, it's self, social, skill, and service. So, what does
Oh,
that look like? I know.
I'm learning, guys. I'm learning.
I tend to over deliver. It's okay.
Awesome. Love it. I love it. So, okay. So let's pause for a second because
Yeah,
there is so much to unpack in clarity alone. And it is so important for podcasters who are they are humans. They
yeah,
have a whole life outside of podcasting. And yet this is just as important in the micro as it is in the macro.
totally.
And so, even just asking each of these questions, what's important right now in this stage of life in my podcast that I
Yeah.
deliver, whether that's towards my people, like from their perspective, what needs to happen right now, the
Mhm.
clarity there, and then who am I? I mean, we talk about identity all the time here on holistic podcasting, or I know I'm changing the name of this podcast in the future. So, in this podcast, we talk a lot about kingdom identity and really who am I? And yeah, what do you bring to the table? Because everybody brings something to the table. And that's so important. And then social, what do we want in our relationships? Gosh, even just thinking about the relationships that we build with guests on our show or
Totally.
connections with other coaches or collaborations. And then skill. Oh, this is a good one. Always having that, where else could I up my game, or having a podcast coach mentor you in skills behind the mic, or having another podcaster, fellow podcaster say, hey, I'd love to listen to your show. Let's give each other feedback and how we can improve on our call to actions or whatever it is. And then the last one, like you said, service. What is the difference? And I think every podcaster that I work with wants to make an impact. And what a great question to refine and come back to. I mean, right now, if it's March 2024, we've had a couple of months into 2024, and now it's time to have all these good clarity questions to refine and tweak and move forward. Okay, that was the first habit. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I know tons, right? But these are quite like we call them habits though because it's not like it's like a one and done. You just do it. Okay, I'm super clear right now, and then off you go for your entire career as a podcast. Like you know what I mean, for the next 10 years. These are habits. So whether you do it on a monthly basis, a quarterly basis, every year, really dialing like, am I still clear? Am I still going down this path that I know is right for me? Oftentimes I find, maybe the topic of a podcast is one thing, but there's a deeper message underneath. Like my
Mhm.
husband wants to start a podcast. I keep encouraging him to do it. Him and
Yes.
one of his friends. Now they're huge soccer fans, like English Premier
Yes.
League soccer, right?
Oh, yes. Huh?
But so he's Irish living in Canada. His good friend is English living in Canada. I'm like, the message under there is kind of that expat, like living abroad, and then
Yes.
kind of Canadians not really understanding the passion behind English football. Like, so it's not just a soccer podcast, right? They're connecting with other expats that are maybe living in different countries, but have that passion and maybe feel a little misunderstood by their partners or friends that don't really get it, right?
Yeah.
So but that always takes that refining, right? Making sure that you're super clear on that message, but also that you're taking actions that are in alignment with that clarity as well. So that means kind of reflecting, checking in. I mean, I do a weekly reflection. I do daily of the key areas of my life, but then at the end of the week, I'll look back and say, okay, what went well this week? What didn't in the different areas of my life? so that I'm not kind of doing the same thing for 4 months. And then all of a sudden, like, you know what, that hasn't been working for the past
Yeah.
3.5, so it's a habit, something to come back to. Okay.
Okay.
Number 2 is energy. So the habit is generating energy. And this is so important especially for podcasters, I feel like, for this community, because you have to have the energy. You have to bring the energy. I mean, some podcasts you've got the video as well, but other times it's just audio. So if you don't have the energy in your voice, you're going to lose people. You're not going to have the impact that you want, and you may not draw in the right type of people. So we talk a lot in high performance about generating the energy that you want. And so understanding that this is a conscious action that we take. So it may look different for different people, but whether that means, you play your favorite song, if you're really revved up by music, those few minutes before you jump on the mic and really get yourself in that space. Or maybe it's a podcast where you've kind of maybe got to connect more emotionally to be able to share that, right? So doing the things that you need to do to show up with the energy that you want to share with others. And that also means taking responsibility for the energy that you bring in, say, to a conversation or, wherever you might be going. So again, these are broader, but it's absolutely still essential, I think, for the podcaster as well, right? And part of energy is also taking care of yourself, looking at all those different areas of life. I mean, we've got competing priorities, right? Whether we have maybe small kids at home, I know most people, at least in my experience, like most people don't just jump into a podcast, start making, earning from their podcast. So it's probably alongside a business, a career, maybe multiple jobs, right? So there's a lot of moving pieces that we have to be aware of. And at the center of that is us. So what are the habits that are going to feed back into us so that we can show up with the energy that we need? The big ones, we all know this: sleep, nutrition, exercise, right? Like, we know this. The one that I want to share, maybe that people don't think of, is that daily replenishment. So what are some replenishment activities that you can do every day throughout the day to keep your energy going? Because maybe you're recording your podcast at like 11 p.m. in the closet once all the kids are asleep, like, who knows? Are you going to have the same kind of energy, right? I know that happens. So, taking those breaks. I mean, I never sit down at my desk for longer than 50 minutes without getting up, maybe getting a glass of water, just maybe walking around the house if I'm at home. But I set a timer so that I'm not sitting, because I could easily sit here for 3 hours glued to my computer doing my work. But that's going to drain my energy physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, all the things, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what is it for you? Maybe it's taking some deep breaths. Maybe it's like dabbling into meditation, and it doesn't have to look like, sitting cross-legged on a rock, for hours in silence. It could look like 5 minutes of turning inward, right? Yep. Maybe if you're a person of faith, maybe that's simply just tapping into, that higher power and getting connected and showing some gratitude, or maybe you need the strength, maybe calling on some extra strength because it's a particularly challenging season. So thinking of that, what habits do you need to be able to bring the energy and generate the energy that you want? So that's habit number 2.
Ooh, love that. Okay. There are so many like key points in there, but I think of an example is for myself, and this energy component was this past fall in 2023. I really was, in the words of my teenage daughter, slumped. So I would hit like 4 o'clock and I'd be like wiped, and which is terrible because that's right when my kids would come home. And I just knew something had to shift. And so again, like taking that time to reflect and be like, okay, where do I need to switch or lay down or close the door or have some sort of energy inducing? And that has been such a deep breath for me, because there were some big things that I had to lay down and say, you know what, that is too much energy for where I am right now in this season of life of 4 teenagers and a mom who owns a business. And I want to bring my best to my kids. Right. And so that means that I'm going to have to shift things around. And again, like you said, that it is our responsibility to take care of ourselves for the sake
Mhm.
of not only us, but for the other people around us. And I love how you said take responsibility for the energy that we're bringing into every conversation and podcast and relationship. So love it.
Yeah, it's not easy.
No.
None of these things are easy. Otherwise, everyone would do them, right? But
Yep.
it's essential, right? It absolutely is. And we do something in high performance called mastering transitions. So when you go between, let's say you're doing some work, admin work on your computer, and let's say you've got a podcast coming up, in the next half an hour or something. That transition between going from like admin work to podcasting, it's your responsibility to take some time, generate that energy. So that's where those habits come in, whatever it is that you need. And then once you kind of get that physical going, is saying, okay, thinking it through, how do I want to show up? What energy do I want to bring? And actually maybe like playing through the podcast quickly in your mind, like I'm going to
Yeah.
be excitable, or I'm going to be, super enthusiastic, or whatever it might be appropriate, right? But
Yeah.
getting yourself into that mindset and then going into that activity, as opposed to just like just finishing up this email, okay, jumping on,
Yes.
taking those few minutes between and using that transition period to generate the energy that you need.
Oh, that's a good example.
Key,
Yep.
key, yeah. Number 3 is the courage, is developing the habit of courage.
Mm.
And this looks different. A lot of people, when you hear the word courage, a lot of people think of like firefighter running into a burning building. Yes, that is one form of courage. We're talking about like showing up as your authentic self. That takes
Mhm.
a whole heck of a lot of courage.
Yeah.
And so, what does that look like in your life right now? Is
Mm.
is there maybe relationships that you have to have a bit of courage to maybe have a tough conversation? Is there something that you want to share with your audience? Maybe something personal that you're like, "Ugh, that feels vulnerable. That feels like I don't want to put that out there." But if it's something that is important to you, or you believe is going to have a significant impact, or will bring you closer to your audience, having the courage to be able to tell your story
Mm.
is huge, right?
So
And yeah, and it's not easy. Just starting a podcast is not easy, right?
yep.
And
Very brave.
there's a lot of like those limiting beliefs, that inner critic that says like, you can't do this. It's not going to be good. No one's going to listen. But you have to be able to stand up to that voice. And
Mhm.
so developing the habit of courage, and that looks like checking in and saying like, what am I not doing? Or what am I kind of backing away from? What am I allowing to distract myself from the thing that I know I should be doing? I know that I want to be doing.
Mhm.
And so really looking inward, and I find journaling is amazing for so many things. I find it really helpful here with this habit, because sometimes, you can walk through that challenging situation. And when you write it out, when you read it back, it's like your brain doesn't always know if something's happened to us or if we've just kind of played it in our minds. That's why athletes do a lot of visualization, because the same neurons fire if they're thinking about, say, their race or their game or whatever it is, and if they're actually doing it. And so you can kind of start to train the brain to be a little bit more familiar with this unfamiliar part, which our brains don't like unfamiliarity.
Mhm.
So you start to get a bit more comfortable. You still have to be able to push yourself to take the step to do the thing, but really looking into the different areas of your life where maybe you need a bit more courage to be able to show up as your true and authentic self. That's a really big one.
Oh, that's a huge one. And I think about for me, and I know there's a couple of other podcasters that have been, pushed to let's try video too. And
Right.
that can feel so scary. And
Scary.
for me personally, it is one of those things where I have to sit back and be like, okay, this is a story that I'm telling myself. And I love your suggestion of the visualization. I love, love, love visualization. And I I tell one of my big soccer kiddos all the time, like, what do you picture in the game? What is it go what how are you gonna get to the ball? Picture you
Mhm.
hitting the ball. Like, how are you gonna navigate? Picture that very feeling and how important it is as a podcaster, even and things like this where you're practicing video or when you're not used to video or even just pressing record as a new podcaster of just walking through that process of what it looks like to take that brave step to press record finishing a podcast and feeling confident that you gave it your heart and you are creating an impact. And so powerful. I love this habit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good one. And do the 360 tour of your life, right? Is there anywhere else that maybe you need to be showing up a little bit more courageous or being able to push yourself? Because like I said, if you've decided to sort of share your story with the world, you might get triggered on certain podcasts of guests sharing their stories or something like that. And if you have other unresolved issues in different areas of your life, unfortunately, that energy can kind of either come into the episode, or it could be brought up during the episode. So
Mhm.
yeah, definitely a good one, a really good one.
Yes.
Number 4 is productivity. Now, this is the area that most people think of a high performance coach, that this is where we spend all of our time. But this is not till number 4. Like, this is the 4th habit. So the having a habit of productivity, it's again going through that tour of your life. Where would you like to be more productive? Or another way of saying it is, where would you like to see more progress? Right? Because I'll often talk about productivity within relationships, and people are like, that doesn't make sense. How are you productive in a relationship? But you're productive if you're getting the progress. Maybe it's a deeper connection in a relationship versus just kind of either maybe the relationship flattening out or getting stale, or just kind of just staying in the same place. But you want maybe a deeper, more meaningful connection with that person. So productivity, what does that look like? This is where we get into some really fun stuff like systems and strategies, which I love. And looking at your life, where do you need to see more progress, and what system could help support that? So the typical one, maybe it's managing a schedule and being able to, maybe you have a running to-do list that is, 50 things, 50 items long, and you just keep adding to it, but never actually feel like you're ticking enough things off. And so one great kind of tip here is to do what we call block time. And I find this can be really helpful when you are maybe a business owner, podcasters for sure, where you're trying to fit things into a very busy life, but they're all very important. And so not just using your calendar to block, time for doctor's appointments or school or classes or things like this. It's like you're putting your tasks and activities into your calendar. So if you were to open up my calendar right now, you would see from 9 to 9:30, I checked my email, like specifically checked and replied to email. The rest of the day, if email is not on the calendar, I don't look into it. If I'm not looking for something specific, if I'm not waiting for something, I only check it at certain blocks during the day. And this may be, people may be like, oh my gosh, but I'm getting the pings and the dings on my phone every 5 minutes and I can't not look. Turn them off, right? Like turn
Yeah.
them off and have a schedule. If you are working on, maybe you've got to do some research for an upcoming guest, block that 30 minutes, 60 minutes, 90 minutes, whatever you think you need, block that into your calendar. Now, that episode that's a week away that you're going to record, but you've got to maybe do some research for it. You're not like, oh, I'll get to it. Then the day comes and you haven't done it, or you're scrambling and now your stress is high. Now your energy is affected. So when you have it in your calendar, you can also kind of sit back and say, okay, I don't have to worry about it because I know on Thursday from 11 to 12:30, I've blocked off that time to research. So I know it's going to be done. Podcast is not till Tuesday. I'm golden, right? Now you're also protecting yourself, protecting your own mental peace, right? Because these things are coming in. So I always say, if it's not in your calendar, it's not getting done. It's just not. So I know a lot of people probably use calendars on their phones, reminders, that kind of thing. Find what works for you. Just because people are using their phones all the time, I'm like a double organizer. I have my phones for things like appointments that I need reminding for if I don't see them every single day. And then I have an actual physical planner that I put all my tasks and activities in.
Yes.
So yeah. So using that block time to be able to, and then it ties back into that clarity piece when you know what's important to you and you're scheduling on your calendar is getting done. So you're saying it's a priority, you're putting on your calendar, and then you're actually executing and you're actually doing it. So even things like texting a friend, calling a friend, I put those things in my calendar because I've said that my closest relationships are extremely important to me.
Mhm.
And if my girlfriend is going for a new position and she's got an interview, I want to make sure I'm messaging her that night saying, hey, how'd the interview go? If she
Yeah.
doesn't message me first, you know?
Mhm.
So I use that as well. And I'm scheduling my priorities in there, then I know I'm going to achieve them. And so this is a big one. This can throw off that productivity part. If you don't have good systems in place, it can throw off all the other habits from being able to be achieved.
Yes, I couldn't agree more, and I think it's so valuable, especially as a podcaster, and you have a business usually that goes hand in hand with this, and so making sure that those blocks of time, or like what we talk about, is the batch recording or the batch preparing or batch writing your newsletters, all of those things is so key. And
Yes.
really finding, like you said, a system that works for you. For some people, batch recording does not work. It's
Yep.
one at a time and that week and that week only, and not more than that. And that works, and put it into a system that works for you. I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the key, right? The system that works for you. Just because somebody else tells you to do a certain way, that idea or concept may be what you need, but you have to kind of figure out, what does that look like for me in my life, in my current age and stage? Maybe that works for them and they don't have kids. Maybe their kids are grown up and I have toddlers and babies. Like, right? Certain things might not work. So it's figuring out what works for you. I always say, like, gather the information, but then you go through it and figure out and test it, right?
Mhm.
Try it out, trial and error. Does this
Yes.
type of schedule work for me? Give yourself a week. See, does it work? If it does, keep going. If not, make the tweaks and figure that out. Super, super important.
Yeah.
All
Love it.
right. And the last one is the habit of influence, of building influence. And I feel like people who, are starting a podcast that have a message, that want to connect with others, we also want to have a degree of influence with our audience. That's super important. So what does that look like? And again, we as a high performance coach, we look at this across your whole life and all the different aspects. But what kind of influence do you want to have with the people around you?
Mm,
And how do you go about creating that influence? So we know influence is tied to trust.
mm,
Trust is tied to experience and, how you make somebody feel repeatedly. I mean, sometimes
mm.
we can have an off day and someone's not going to be like, ah, person's terrible. Like, we can have those, but if every time I see you, you're in a bad mood, every time I see you, you're gossipy, every time I see you, you've got something to complain about, you're gonna have an influence on me, but not in the way you probably want, right?
Mhm,
So how do you want to show up? And what kind of influence do you want to have on the people in your life?
mm,
And how can you role model that behavior? And so again, this is tied to, I mean, all of the other habits. It kind of accumulates into this influence one, right? We never start with the influence. You got to get clear. You got to be in control of your energy. You've got to be able to take courage, right? Because that's a big part of being able to influence others. And you got to be organized and productive and moving in the right direction. And then naturally, oftentimes, influence comes.
mm,
And then you can look ahead and say, okay, now if I get a bit more specific, what kind of influence do I want to have with people? And oftentimes, if you think about, if someone says to you, who is a really influential person in your life? And you might get, maybe it's somebody's parent, maybe it's a teacher or a coach from their past. And we say, why is that person so influential? Usually it's because they've taught you something,
mm,
whether it's a particular skill, or maybe it's a particular perspective or mindset or way of thinking about something.
mm,
That's when real deep influence can be born, and sustained. If I teach you something that changes your life for the better, you're probably going to remember me for a while, right? You're going to be like, oh, I can, I think the one of the best, like, music to a coach's ears is when they said, oh, you were in my head. I heard you say, put it in the calendar. I'm like, yes, like, that's the influence that I want to have, right? So
uh,
thinking about your audience, what kind of influence do you want to have with your audience and your community? And so what can you teach them is one. And then the other one is making them feel a certain way. So
mm,
maybe that is, eliciting some sort of emotion, whether it's maybe somebody feels heard and feels seen by you sharing your story. right?
Mhm.
That's something that is going to influence and stick with that person. Maybe they're in a dark place, and it's your constant, optimism and positivity that helps bring them out and bring them back to the light. So whether you teach them something, make them feel a certain way, typically those are the things that carry real influence that lasts, that's sustained. So yeah, what is that for you, and how do you go about role modeling that for the people in your life?
Such good questions to really evaluate, and really, like you said, it's really for every area of your life. And I love actually really honing in on the podcast, because if you're sitting down and you're thinking about, how do I want to show up and allow my listeners to feel like my listeners, I think I want them to know that they can confidently and bravely and know that they can show up bringing their worth into this world. And that is a tagline of mine, is be heard, be seen, be known. And I hope that they hear that in all of my podcasts. And then with them, and as they sit down to record, really having that focus and intentionality of, this is how I want to show up. Whether it's the mom who has a podcast that helps all the homeschooling moms, and she wants to show up and be like, you can do this. Or it's the financial coach that wants to break off the barriers of women who are making lots of money, and yet nobody is coaching them on how to stand in this amazing privilege of
Mhm.
having lots of finances, and just stand in that empowerment. I just think of all of these different podcasters that I work with, and imagining them sitting down and really owning that influence that they do bring to the table. It's really powerful.
Yeah, you're so right, and it comes back around when you feel that when you see the impact that you're trying to create, you see
Mhm.
that come back around. It's just like fuel for the fire, and it keeps the cycle going, right?
Yeah.
When you know you're having a positive impact, and they're learning from you, your people, whether that's your audience, your family members, your friends, your community. It comes back, and it kind of reignites that flame within you to continue to serve, and to continue to serve in the best possible way.
Mhm. I totally agree. Wow. Okay. So the 5 habits, one more time. Let's go over them one more time, and
Yep.
then we'll keep going.
Yeah. So first one is clarity, having a clear vision of who you are, and where your life is headed. So clarity, energy, generating the energy that you need, courage, summoning the courage that you need for those uncomfortable and tough times in life, whether that's sharing your story, having the difficult conversation. Number 4 is productivity. So looking at, are you getting the progress that you want in a particular area? And if not, how can you support yourself to take action? Looks
Mhm.
like systems, processes, developing habits within that area of life to keep you moving forward. And then the 5th one is influence. So the impact that you're having on others.
Awesome. Woo. Okay, you guys. This is a full episode. Like, I took many, many notes, and I am so excited to just really dig into each of these questions and these habits as we continue through 2024. And y'all know I love being intentional, and I want you to be intentional about what you're bringing to the table too. So, such good questions to ask and be aware of, and really to get to that high performance of, let's bring our best to the table. Awesome. Thank you so much, Alexis. I would love for people to know how to get in touch with you, to connect with you. Where can they find you?
Absolutely. I'm on every platform under my name, Alexis Lenihan. You can find me on Instagram, on LinkedIn, on Facebook. My website is alexislenahan.com. And yeah, I'm kind of everywhere. You can't you can't get away from me sometimes once you do the search.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your coaching wisdom. And like I said at the beginning, I knew you were going to just give us so much meat to chew on as podcasters and as people and humans in this life. So thank you.
Thank you for having me. It was great.
Thanks for listening today. Hey, I want you to know that there is an opportunity for you and I to connect. I would love to do that. Find a link below, and we can schedule a one-on-one free 15-minute consultation. I want to hear, where are you in your podcasting journey, and how can I help serve you and help you bring that kingdom impact dream into reality?